Have you ever wondered in adoption who names the baby? We're going to talk about that today on All About Adoption. Hi, I'm Stephanie A. If we haven't met, I have helped thousands of families form their family through adoption, and we have a step-by-step process that we take families through to make the adoption process easier. So in terms of naming the baby, who names the baby? In reality, both the birth mother or birth parents and the adoptive parents name the baby. That's the short answer to everything, but that's not always how it goes. I have seen the gamut. I have seen it done every which way you can think of. So the most common way, a traditional way that used to be done is that the expecting or the birth mother would name the baby, or the birth parents would name the baby, and that name goes on the birth certificate. And then when the adopting family adopts the baby, they name the baby, and that name goes on their birth certificate. So just in case you didn't know this, the birth certificate is the only legal document that can legally be modified. So what that means is that there's a birth certificate that the birth family names the baby, and then there's a birth certificate that the adopting family names the baby. So just, give you an example of the birth certificate. What my husband and I adopted our daughter, and when we got her adoption finalized, we got a new birth certificate, and it showed that I had delivered our daughter in a totally different town in our state on the date that she was born, when I wasn't even in that town. So it's going to look as if this child was actually born to you, the adopting family. There's a lot of controversy about this, but legally that's how it's done with adoption. There's two birth certificates that are created. So going back to naming, so sometimes I have mamas who will name the baby the same thing that the adopting family are naming. Sometimes it'll be the same first name and middle name, but it'll be her last name. Sometimes she'll put the family's naming the baby, they'll put the first and middle and the family's last name, because they don't want the birth certificate to change. They want the consistency to be there for their child, for this child to have the same name since they were born. And then I've had some mamas who, very rarely, I have to tell you, this is extremely rare, but I do have some mamas who insist on naming the baby and will insist that you keep that name. And if it's not agreeable, it's a deal breaker for them. So that is why, and as I said, that's extremely rare, but that is why it's really important when it comes to naming the baby that this is a conversation that you have early on in the relationship with each other. So that way there's no hurt feelings. You're not finding out about this at the hospital at the last minute and then watch the adoption fall apart because there was a misunderstanding on the naming of the baby. When we have our mamas create a hospital plan, we talk about the naming. Normally this has already been discussed with the adopting family. And if it hasn't, then this is the time that we do discuss it. And everyone talks to each other about the naming of the baby. So just know that there is no right or wrong way. I personally like it when the birth mama and the adopting family choose a name together and they use this name, or at least use a portion of a name. So like, for example, with our daughter, of course, we kept her first name because she was 8 years old when we adopted her, but we did modify her middle name. But it was very similar to the name she already had. So it was just a little bit different. So it was still embracing her birth heritage and where she came from, but also just making it a little more personal to show her that she's come into our family as well. And of course, the child who you adopt gets your last name. So sometimes if you may find yourself in a situation where the mama wants to keep the name and wants you to keep the name, then just know that the child will have your last name in the end. So I hope you found this helpful, and I hope to see you next week. Thanks. Bye.